Oh, drat these computers. They're so naughty and so complex. I could pinch them.
What's up, everyone, and welcome. In this episode, we are going to talk about phishing. Phishing is a cyber attack that uses disguised email as a weapon. It's one of the oldest types of cyber attacks, dating back to the 90s, and it's still one of the most widespread and pernicious, with phishing messages and techniques becoming increasingly sophisticated. According to research, including the 2019 Verizon Data Breach Investigations report, nearly a third, that's 33%, of all breaches involved phishing. For cyber espionage attacks, that number jumps to 78%. The worst phishing news, I think, is that these perpetrators are getting much better at it, thanks to well-produced, off-the-shelf tools and templates. An organization succumbing to such an attack typically sustains severe financial losses, in addition to declining market share, reputation, and consumer trust. Depending on the scope, a phishing attempt might escalate into a cybersecurity incident from which a business will have a difficult time recovering. We want to make sure we are secure and prepared in case one of these attackers tries to infiltrate our system. So today, we're going to take a look at phishing and see how we can protect our company, systems, and clients from it. Here's a look at the agenda. We're going to start off, as always, with a definition. What is phishing? In order to build a good defense, we must intimately know our enemy. We're going to walk over to the anatomy of the attack and see how does it work. And then we're going to sum it up with what can I do and steps to improve. Before I jump in, here is a short list of some of the resources I used to create this episode. Now, you can certainly spend hours researching this on your own, or you can sit back, enjoy, and benefit from my work. But make sure you pay attention, because it does not matter if you're the CEO, if you're a secretary, if you're the guy who delivers the mail, or if you're in IT. This does affect you directly. Let me take a minute to give you some powerful reasons why you should share this video. Now, if you have seen this before, feel free to skip to the next section or just enjoy it again. If you haven't seen it yet, I want to show you how you can be a superstar in your team and your company just by sharing this video. First off, I really appreciate you watching this episode, liking it, and of course, subscribing to my channel. But I ask you to share it through any and all channels you have access to, whether Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Pinterest. You can link to it from your websites, or even send it in an email to your colleagues, friends, and family. If we can spread this information to enough people, we all together can work to make the internet more secure. So, share it with developers in your team or developers that you know, so they can integrate the security measures I will outline in this episode directly into their workflow. Share it with quality testers in your team or ones you know, so they can benefit from this information and improve things like writing their acceptance criteria and test cases. Share it with project managers and product owners so they can make sure projects have the right security principles in mind and can talk intelligently to stakeholders about the importance of these measures. Share it with CEOs, VPs, and managers to show them that you're on top of these topics, taking them seriously, making you look like a superstar in their eyes. And finally, share it with your mom, dad, grandma, or friends, or anyone you can think of. Keeping them safe and helping them have a safer experience on the internet will definitely save you time and headache. Now, if you haven't already, right now is the perfect time to pause this video and share it before we really get deep into the content. Thanks again for your support. So, what is phishing? Phishing is a type of social engineering where an attacker sends a fraudulent, spoofed message designed to trick a human victim into revealing sensitive information to the attacker or to deploy malicious software on the victim's infrastructure, like ransomware. Phishing attacks have become increasingly sophisticated and often transparently mirror the site being targeted, allowing the attacker to observe everything while the victim is navigating the site and transverse any additional security boundaries with the victim. As of 2020, phishing is by far the most common attack performed by cybercriminals, with the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center recording over twice as many incidents of phishing than any other type of computer crime. It is key that we understand that phishing is just one part of how other attacks happen. It's one piece to Moving on to ransomware or malware. Phishing is like data gathering and access gathering, and then the real stuff happens. It's key that we understand the goal of phishing. So there are a couple different ways to break attacks down into categories. Generally, a phishing campaign tries to get the victim to do one of two things. Hand over sensitive information is one. These messages aim to trick the user into revealing important data, often a username and password that the attacker can use to breach a system or account. The classic version of this scam involves sending out an email tailored to look like a message from something like a major bank. By spamming out messages to millions of people, the attackers ensure that at least some of those recipients will be customers of the bank. The victim clicks on a link in the message and is taken to a malicious site designed to resemble the bank's webpage, and then hopefully enters their username and password. The attacker can now access the victim's real account. The second goal is to have the victim download malware. Like a lot of spam, these types of phishing emails aim to get the victim to infect their own computer with malware. Often the messages are what are called soft-targeted. They might be sent to an HR staffer with an attachment that purports to be a job seeker's resume, for example, or an invoice, or a survey or something like that. These attachments are often zip files, Microsoft documents, PDFs, and they're embedded with malicious code. The most common form of the malicious code is ransomware. It is estimated that 93% of phishing emails contain ransomware attachments. That's a rounding error. It's 100%. Every phishing email's got an attachment with ransomware in it. What you could basically surmise from that. Now that we know what the goal is, let's look at things that we can keep an open eye or be extra sensitive to on sort of the most targeted services or websites. So they took roughly 50,000 plus fake login pages and they monitored them to see kind of which brands the attackers were using. 22% came in PayPal. 19% came in Microsoft with all their products, Office 365 or all their online logins that they have for whatever service or tool you want to use. Facebook came in at 15%, eBay at 6%, and Amazon at 3%. Now, that's not just the only way they try to attack or infiltrate. Other times, attackers might send what are called soft-targeted emails at someone playing a particular role in an organization, even if they don't know anything about them personally. Some phishing attacks aim to get login information from or infect the computers of specific people. Attackers dedicate much more energy to tricking those victims who have been selected because the potential rewards are quite high. So now we know the goal. We know sort of some of the attack vectors, which sites they're trying to attack us with, so that we can keep a better open eye when we get an email about PayPal or Microsoft to verify that it really is PayPal and Microsoft. Now let's look at some of the types of phishing, the main types. There's generally considered to be 8. Some people say 11, but there's just variations. So the first is the most used because it's just blanket spamming at everybody and their mother. And that was the example with the bank. Sent out millions of emails hoping that just some of them or enough of them actually have an account at the bank. It's called mass market emails. The most common form of phishing is the general mass mail type, where someone sends an email pretending to be someone else and tries to trick the recipient in doing something, usually logging into a website or downloading malware. Attacks frequently rely on email spoofing, where the email header, the from field, is forged to make the message appear as if it were sent by a trusted sender. However, phishing attacks don't always look like a UPS delivery notification email or a warning message from PayPal about password expiration or an Office 365 email about storage quotas. Some attacks are crafted specifically targeting organizations and individuals, and others rely on methods other than email. The second most used type is called spear phishing. It's going after specific targets. Phishing attacks get their name from the notion that fraudsters are phishing for random victims by using spoofed or fraudulent email as bait. Spear phishing attacks extend the phishing analogy, as attackers are specifically targeting, with just spear, high-value victims and organizations. So instead of trying to get banking credentials from like 1,000 consumers who may have some kind of max on their card of $250 or $500, the attacker may find it more lucrative to target a handful of businesses that may have $250,000 at their disposal on their cards or through their wire transfers. A nation-state attacker, on the other hand, may target an employee working for another government agency or a government official to steal state secrets. So spear phishing attacks are extremely successful because the attackers spend a lot of time crafting information specific to the recipient, such as referencing a conference the recipient may have just attended, or sending a malicious attachment where the file name references a topic the recipient is interested in. In a 2017 phishing campaign, the group called Group 74, also known as SOFACT, App 28, and Fancy Bear, targeted cybersecurity professionals themselves with an email pretending to be related to the Cyber Conflict U.S. Conference, an event organized by the United States Military Academy's Army Cyber Institute, along with the NATO Cooperative Military Academy and the NATO Cooperative Cyber Defense Center of Excellence. These guys targeted the cybersecurity community with a phishing attack. Now, I want to walk you through an example. Now, this is something I did in less than 5 minutes, okay? And I went with conferences. Like, how can I, basically use a conference to potentially, or like build the story for what a phishing attack could be like, so that we all understand how easy it is for these guys to get public information about us and then try to turn around and use it. So we have to keep our eyes open. Now, with conferences, I just looked in Europe, because that's where I am right now, for tech conferences, because I'm in tech, right? So I looked at the Dublin Tech Summit. Oh, Dublin Tech Summit, they do a really good job of telling me all the speakers. So I see all these people. Douglas Terrier from NASA. I see somebody from Revolut, Clearco, Reddit, Mattermost, Spotify. Now, out of all the sort of the companies and faces and names, the one that stood out as the one I know zero about was this young lady. So I said to myself, how much information can I find out in the shortest period of time about this person that I could potentially use in some kind of an attack? So she was selected. Within minutes, Wikipedia page showing me birthday, country of origin, all the different kinds of businesses that this very successful woman in her right has created and headed and led, and this, that, and the other. It's tons of information. Then, LinkedIn page with a nice picture up here showing me other people that are connected to her that I could potentially find out who they are and then continue to build my story. Twitter page, again, showing me the same picture, showing me that these people are extremely important within her sort of circle. Then I went to the website and I was able to find email addresses. Now, info@clear.co is kind of a throwaway email address, or it's a catch-all, if you will, but press.clear.co could be very interesting, considering I know this person's going to the Dublin Tech Summit. So talking to the person in press, if it really is an individual, I could start gathering more information and building more of a story until I attack. Now, I went even one step further and said, okay, well, what if I don't want to go through press, or what if kind of press catches on or just stops responding or doesn't respond at all? Can I talk to this person directly? So I did a search for an email, and yes, it's encrypted, but the encryption here is super stupid. It's really easy. I already know what this email address is. So I have all the information I need to then craft a story. Now, that's the information gathering about a spear phishing, or later whale phishing, for example, attack. Is one thing we have to know. It's not just a link within an email that a person could potentially be tricked into clicking on. What about a PDF? PDFs, we have to realize, PDFs are not text files. A PDF is like a self-contained application that can run code, specifically JavaScript code, inside the PDF. Now, let's say I were to create a menu, and I call it the Dublin Tech Summit menu. And this is just too healthy for me, so I move over to cookies. Right? This is my Dublin Tech Summit menu that I send out to recipients once I gather all my information. And inside of there, I put in a form. Now, the thing about forms there are multiple ways to create forms inside of PDFs, but the thing about forms inside of PDFs is that there is the ability to verify the form. Right? So I could verify whether the input is correct. If I ask for a telephone number and there are letters in there, I can check that using JavaScript. So the fact that a submit button is there and that information is stored inside of a PDF once I submit that form and then I send it back shows that code can be executed, not just nice code that does its real job of validating whether or not somebody really filled out what kind of salad they like. Do they want veggie, or do they want, steak, or do they want a raw cow or live cow? It can be used for nefarious reasons, which pressing on that submit button could be extremely dangerous. It could execute code. It could call outside websites. It could transfer information about you to an external source. It could trigger the opening of another document that may be embedded in my PDF or may be pulling down from a website. And that other document, specifically a Word document, which might be embedded in the PDF, could itself be the ransomware code. Or it could be something that pulls that ransomware code down onto your computer and encrypts your entire machine, and you are now a subject of ransomware. So we know the goal, we know the top two types of ransomware, and we're going to talk about the other ones because they're also important to know how they work, what the goal is, what these people are trying to accomplish. And now we know how serious it could be. With just 5 minutes time, you could pick out a subject, you can get as much public information on them as possible, and craft a way to use phishing in order to get a foothold in their system, to trick them to do something, to trick them to install something onto their computer in a malicious manner. And this is the danger. This is what we have to educate all of our employees, again, secretaries, CEOs, people in IT, interns, so that from day one at the company, they understand the severity, and they're always checking certain specific signs within emails from people they don't know or from people they do know to ensure that they're not being attacked. So let's move on to the next type, is whaling. It's going after the big one. It's like spear phishing, but it's going up to a much bigger prey. A phishing attack specifically targeting an enterprise's top executives is called whaling, as the victim is considered to be a high-value person, and the stolen information will be much more valuable than what a regular employee might offer. Think about the information you can get from a CEO's machine versus an intern's machine. The account credentials belonging to the CEO will open up more doors than an entry-level employee. The goal is to steal data, employee information, and cash. Whaling also requires additional research because the attacker needs to know who the intended victim communicates with and the kind of discussions they have. Examples include references to customer complaints, legal subpoenas, or even a problem with the executive suite. Attackers typically start with social engineering to gather information about the victim and the company before crafting the phishing message that will be used in the whaling attack. So just think back to the person I just showed you all the, how you could get all that public information about. It's just that simple. So the next one is business email compromise. So it's not all really coming from external email. It could come from internal, well-crafted internal email. So aside from the mass distributed general phishing campaigns, criminals target key individuals in finance and accounting departments via business email compromise, scams, and CEO email fraud. By impersonating financial officers and CEOs, these criminals attempt to trick victims into initiating money transfers into unauthorized accounts. Typically, attackers compromise the email account of a senior executive or financial officer. So they're hacking somebody's email account or email server by exploiting an existing infection or via a spear phishing attack. The attacker lurks and monitors the executive's email activity for a period of time. So another key point here, this isn't something that they're always doing in 2 seconds, and it's done, wham, bang, and done. They're getting into the system, they're lurking and monitoring to learn about how things work, so that that's how they're then going to craft their attack. The actual attack takes the form of a false email that looks like it has come from the compromised executive's account being sent to someone who is a regular recipient. The email appears to be important and urgent, and it requests that the recipient send a wire transfer to an external or unfamiliar bank account. The money ultimately lands in the attacker's bank account. Now, the average wire transfer attempt in the second quarter of 2020 was $80,000. So this is not chump change. This is big money. The next type, clone phishing, when copies are just as effective. Clone phishing requires the attacker to create a nearly identical replica of a legitimate message to trick the victim into thinking it is real. The email is sent from an address resembling the legitimate sender, and the body of the message looks the same as the previous message. So it's like you have a spelling mistake and you want to send a new copy, or you forgot to add an attachment. The only difference is that the attachment or the link in the message has been swapped out with a malicious one. The attacker may say something along the lines of having to resend the original or updated version to explain why the victim was receiving the same message again. This attack is based on a previously seen legitimate message, making it more likely that users will fall for the attack. Again, you just got it, oh, I'm sorry, I misspelled something, or I added the wrong attachment, or I forgot to add the attachment, or I thought I forgot to add the attachment. Whatever the excuse is, there's an excuse why you're receiving the same message twice, even though it's coming from potentially two different email addresses, or coming from the same email address, but not from the same person. An attacker who has already infected one user may use this technique against another person who also received the message that is being cloned. In another variation, the attacker may create a cloned website with a spoofed domain to trick the victim. So that's the bank example that we had at the beginning. Then there's phishing. Phishing over the phone? Phishing stands for voice phishing, and it entails the use of the phone. Typically, the victim receives a call with a voice message disguised as a communication from a financial institution. For instance, the message might ask the recipient to call a number and enter their account information or PIN for security or other official purposes. However, the phone number rings straight to the attacker via a voice over IP service. In a sophisticated phishing scam in 2019, criminals called victims pretending to be Apple tech support and providing users with a number to call to resolve the security problem. Like the old Windows tech support scam, this scam took advantage of users' fears of their devices getting hacked. So yes, also over the phone. Smishing. They're getting weird. Phishing via text messages. Smishing, a portmanteau of phishing and SMS, the latter being the protocol used by most phone text message services, in case you didn't know, of course, is a cyber attack that uses misleading text messages to deceive victims. The goal is to trick you into believing that a message has arrived from a trusted person or organization. Like, hey, this is John, send me the blah, blah, blah. And then, or, hey, Mom, this is your son. Can you send me $1,000 through some wiring service? Then they convince you to take action that gives you the attacker exploitable information like a bank account login credentials, for example, or access to your mobile device. Smishing is on the rise because people are more likely to read and respond to text messages than email. 90% of text messages are read and 45% are responded to, while the equivalent numbers of email are 20% and 6%, respectively. And users are often less watchful for suspicious messages on their phones than on their computers. It goes without saying. How many messages, how many buzzes do you get on your phone every day, whether it's from you got a new email or some message from somebody asking to buy something on eBay Kleinanzeigen or eBay, or something from PayPal, or an SMS from your boss. You're getting messages constantly, Facebook updates, Twitter updates, all over the place, right? So you're so bombarded with information that your concentration is lower by phone, and they're taking advantage of that. The next one is snowshoeing. And yes, those are snowshoes on the right. They are not band-aids. Spreading poisonous messages. Snowshoeing, or hit-and-run spam, requires attackers to push out messages via multiple domains and IP addresses. Each IP address sends out a low volume of messages. So instead of sending out millions of emails from one domain, they're sending out a couple 100,000 from multiple domains. So the reputation or the volume-based spam filtering technologies that exist, they can't recognize and block malicious messages right away. It takes them a little bit more time. Some of the messages make it to the email inboxes before the filters learn to block them. Then there's Hailstorm. Now, I don't have a fancy picture for that. It's just called Hailstorm. The Hailstorm campaigns work the same as Snowshoe, except the messages are sent over an extremely short time span. Some Hailstorm attacks end just as the anti-spam tools catch on and update the filters to block future messages. But the attackers have already moved on to the next campaign. So let's look at 2 examples just to see what we need to keep our eyes open for in terms of looking at an email and recognizing that it is suspicious or fake or it's a phishing email. We're going to start off with this fancy email from American Express. Now the first thing you should be looking at is the from. And you see that the name and the email don't match. Okay, it says it's coming from American Express, and I could guarantee you that a corporation like American Express is not using an email, a domain pentagon-seguridad.cl, it looks like, right? Next, the American Express company is not the name of the organization. The next may not be so obvious to a lot of people because they don't necessarily focus on that, but a company like American Express, you know what the logo looks like, and that's not the logo. Then they always try to put a sense of urgency. Here it's still going above and beyond, giving you a time and date, but they try to instill a sense of urgency. Like, oh, I have a really urgent task, call me back, or, send me your telephone number so I can WhatsApp you, or this, that, and the other thing. And then they continue the process. They have to create urgency so you do it right away without thinking. The urgency makes you think, oh, this is for my boss, I got to do it right away, as opposed to saying I'll do it later and thinking about it and saying, well, that doesn't really make sense. The more you think about it, the more you realize that it doesn't make sense, and they want to avoid that. Last thing here is when you click here, and it looks like I misspelled here too, review your account now link, it takes you to a different website. So making sure you're aware of things like, the SSL certificate, the little lock in your browser, or the actual domain that you're landing on, if it's like, huffandpuff123, or if it's chase.huffandpuff123.com. I mean, it's obvious that it's not a legitimate JP Morgan Chase or, Citibank or any other bank or PayPal domain. So the next one, doesn't have, it looks pretty professional. It looks like it's from GoDaddy. But again, within the first signal, or the first thing that you would check, the from, you would see that something is wrong. GoDaddy is not using go-daddy-file.website as their domain. If you get an email from GoDaddy, it's coming from GoDaddy. Regardless of what the content is, as soon as you look at the from, you should be able to see whether or not it's legitimate or not. So, let's look at some specific steps you can take. Besides the things I just mentioned within those example emails, of course. The first is stay alert while checking your email. We often turn our brains off and just scroll, delete, click without really internalizing what we're looking at. We have so many other things to do. We have meetings, we've got projects, we have whatever other work to do that we look at checking our email as an automated process. We just, just kind of glance over it, don't really read the whole email, either click on it, we just look at high-level stuff, but we don't focus on high-level stuff. We need to stay alert while we're checking our email, especially if you're not expecting an email from an organization or from a service that you use. Don't just click on links to websites unless you're 100% sure you recognize the sender. For example, if you go to log into Microsoft Office Online and they say, they're sending you a confirmation code link to your email, then you're expecting an email about this. But if all of a sudden one pops up into your inbox, then you should be suspicious and start looking for those from, the logo, misspellings, urgency, company name. Use an antivirus with email and web protection. Goes without saying. This really should be number 1, but, I didn't make it number 1 in my list. Ensuring all employees, even interns, have an up-to-date antivirus is crucial. Anyone responsible for onboarding new employees should know this and ensure new devices employees get the antivirus. And finally, in terms of specific steps you can take here, against phishing, if you're not sure at first glance, check the message's headers. There are different ways to do it in different programs, but essentially you want to see if you can see an original email address, original IP address, or domains where it's being sent from. And if that's just too technical for you or too technical for some of your employees, send it to IT or your security team for them to investigate. It's better to take that extra time and have somebody else verify the email is legitimate for you than you to click on something and potentially lock your entire company down into ransomware. So now we're going to go to general steps you can take, overall security steps that I put in every one of my episodes. First thing is educate your users. And this is also, I'll say, specific to this as well. You need to educate them to spot these suspicious emails and activity and contact IT if they encounter anything suspicious. So, yeah. You want to make time for regular offline backups, and you want to test backups to ensure they can be restored from reliably. If you have constantly doing offline backups and you're testing to make sure that they're legitimate, should an intern or secretary or PM or a VP or the CEO himself be the cause of this kind of attack and the systems and ransomware, you have a much better chance of getting yourself back online without succumbing to ransom payments or anything else. You can just get back online and fix the problem. Have a plan and review it regularly. Systems change, requirements change, new vulnerabilities arise. If you have your own Microsoft Exchange server, you need to make sure it's patched, otherwise they could potentially hack into your Microsoft Exchange server, snoop emails, and do the whale phishing attack. Review your infrastructure, hardware, and software regularly. There are many hardware devices that run into end of life. There's tons of Cisco firewalls that, years and years and years ago were the best, and they just ran into end of life. They got no more security updates. They got, there were issues found with microchips on or specific chips on in the device itself, leaving it prone to new types of attacks. So you have to review your infrastructure, make sure you're up to date, and you have to review your software and make sure that that stuff is up to date. You want to update systems regularly, and that goes with reviewing of your infrastructure. But it should be obvious that patching all of your systems is going to keep you safer. Restrict write permissions on file servers. If you have interns or if you have employees and 90% of what they do is download, let's say, their vacation document they need to fill out and send in, they don't need write permissions on file servers. Use advanced endpoint protection that can identify new malware variants and detect malicious traffic on servers, on any device that you can find this kind of protection for. It can scan your system and it can find them. It can scan your mail and find them, which is the next one. Use email and web protection to block access to malicious websites and scan all downloads. You want to use at least a 2 firewall-based system in your infrastructure, an external network firewall, like a hardware-based firewall, as well as a local machine-based firewall on all the machines that you have installed. If ransomware gets installed on your system, 99% of them try to make an external contact to their command control server to at least download encryption keys to begin the encryption process. Some make more communication, like transferring information back and forth, like sending if new users have logged on, like the new Linux variant that was found, the bash script-based variant, which I did a video on. You should check it out. So if you block external connections to only known services that your organization requires through the firewall, then these types of calls to unknown IP addresses would be blocked. You want to restrict outgoing connections where possible, which again feeds into the firewall point, more specifically to the firewall point. Having 2 firewalls is double the protection. You have your system-based firewall where it can lock down only the services required on those servers, whereas the network-based firewall could potentially have more ports or rules that deal with different types of servers and different types of users and your VPN and all this other stuff. But then restricting the outgoing connections where possible is going to limit the ability for any type of ransomware to get outside. You want to disconnect from networks immediately if you suspect infection. Right, the newest ransomware attack on Kaseya, the Florida IT company, they immediately took off. As soon as they noticed a problem, they immediately took their entire cloud-based software as a service application offline. They immediately sent out messages to all their clients that they should turn off their Kaseya VSA software servers so that it can limit the damage going out once they notice. So pull plugs. It's better to pull plugs and be offline an hour than to risk it and be like, oh, I don't think it's a problem. Then it becomes a massive problem. Finally, get insurance if possible. There's a lot of debate out there. There was talks that the U.S. government's going to ban companies from paying ransom. But in all of the cases that I've studied where companies have paid the ransom, there's been at least some help, if not all help, from the insurance company. So a €15 million or a $50 million ransom payment could bankrupt some companies. Other companies might just be able to suck it up. But to have the insurance and have the peace of mind that should something happen, and your only way out, if you don't follow any of these other rules, I mean specifically the offline backups is going to help you avoid having to pay because you have regular offline backups that you can reinstall your systems from. But if you don't have that, if you just don't have this resources, or you just, after this video you're like, whatever, at least get insurance then, because only then can you at least have some help in terms of getting your systems back online, being able to pay that ransomware to get the encryption key to get your system online. But keep in mind, if you pay and you get the decryption key, it doesn't mean you're online the next day. The decryption process for most of these ransomwares is extremely slow, and depending on how much data there is, it could take months or years before everything in your network is decrypted. So just paying the ransom doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be back online lickety-split. So, with that, thanks for your attention, and don't forget to share this video. I hope you learned something, and I do look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Take care.